So, quick question. How many of you have seen Top Gun Maverick? A lot of hands. All right. Anybody seen it more than twice? A few? Okay. Seen it 4 times personally. Thought it was a great film. I love aviation and flying. And I thought since the movie had just come out, thinking about a conference talk, this would be a great time to come out of the nerd closet because I love aviation secretly. Because everybody's seen Top Gun Maverick. So now would be a great time to talk about it, right? And my love of naval aviation. So that's why I'm here today, to talk about that. Just a few words about me. I am a technologist. I started out in DevOps. Actually, in my former life, I was a classical musician and then transferred over to DevOps when I moved to Austin and kind of do the DevOps SRE thing now. It's a double-edged sword for me and my family because it's a job and a hobby, so I love playing with computers on the side and for work. Also, just trivia facts. I like cooking and eating a whole food, plant-based diet. Just recently got into running, finished my first marathon last February in Austin. And yeah, right? Running, yes. And I'm a naval aviation enthusiast, and I'm a simmer too, one of those nerds that wears a VR goggle headset, and I go and fly with a bunch of guys who do this in real life. My call sign is Pipes. I'm a Lieutenant JG in Virtual Carrier Air Wing 8. I'm assigned to a virtual VFA Fighter Squadron 87 Golden Warriors. Not much to say. I have over 500 pilot traps in VR. Not the real thing, right? But practice some. And I have done about 100 times what we're going to talk about today, being an LSO and waving passes. A bit about me, too, where I work at a company called OpsLevel. We're a startup. We are a microservice catalog and developer portal that lets you kind of own your services, measure their maturity, and then we have things like service templating where we can actually build in some of your best practices as well. And you don't have to cut corners on security, quality, or reliability. That's our sort of where we're going to plant our flag on. So let's start off with a civic briefing. If you're an airman flying on a carrier, you would know civic as being the carrier, which is the CV part of that, and then you'd have the intelligence center. So civic is your carrier intelligence center. You're going to get a briefing. And before you fly, they're going to give you a few things. One of those notably being you're going to have some NOTAMs. What are NOTAMs? They are notice to air missions. These are things like temporary flight restrictions of airspaces, things like that. So let's start off with just a few NOTAMs. Notice as we start our talk. The first is, what I'm going to talk about today in its entirety is not representative of the United States Department of Defense in any way, right? I'm not a lawyer, but I think I should put this there just to be sure. I'm a virtual pilot that does this for fun. As a naval aviation enthusiast, I'm not an actual pilot in the Navy. I've never landed on an aircraft carrier. NOTAM 2. So kind of what are the goals of this talk? As I thought about putting it together, first, maybe a goal could be that you're going to be the hero or the ace of your next Top Gun screening. You can impress your friends with some cool trivia about being an LSO. And maybe Top Gun will look a little different to you when you watch it and you see it. But really, I want to give you guys an appreciation of the complexity of like a very different occupation rather than DevOps, what we do, right? And hopefully you can glean a few stories and nuggets of truth from this talk. And really, in kind of assimilating and looking at this analogy of LSO and then comparing it to a DevOps person, maybe we can glean things about our profession, practices we could pick up that make things more safe and reliable. That's the goal of the talk today. NOTAM 3, what to observe. So this talk, I will say up front, has a ton of these like acronyms in it, these things. Hopefully I explain them all. If you don't, feel free to ask me afterwards. I'm happy to go into what they are. Also, as you go through it, just look and kind of think, hey, like this LSO thing sounds kind of like what we do in DevOps. See if you can find it and put some of those pieces together. And maybe you'll find something I haven't even thought of. And I'd love to hear them afterwards. So, first thing to do, we're talking about landing on an aircraft carrier or being an LSO. There's this thing called the boat. Naval aviators do have a sense of humor. They call this giant aircraft carrier just a boat. We're going to the boat today. So let's understand what this boat is. So here you can see a few images of aircraft carriers. These are primarily of our Nimitz class aircraft carriers, not the newest Ford class, but these comprise most of our current fleet today. In the bottom right, you can see where we came from. That was the first aircraft carrier. It was just like a battleship with a wood deck on top. Very simple, right? But today, our normal carriers, they are 4.5 acres of flight deck on top of this thing. That's a lot of U.S. sovereign soil that can go anywhere in the world with a very little notice. Some other facts. It's $9.7 billion per ship for each carrier. They displace anywhere from 100 to 106,000 tons when fully loaded. They're about 1,092 feet long. 252 feet wide. They have 2 nuclear reactors on board with 4 sets of turbines that power these giant propellers that generate 260,000 ship horsepower. This carrier can travel 30 plus knots, which is 35 plus miles per hour. They won't say exactly that's classified what the top speed is, but even 35 miles per hour is pretty fast for something that large, I would say. The range of the ship, it's unlimited. It's nuclear powered, so you can go as far as you want to go in 25 years. And there are 3,500 people, roughly, that comprise ship's company. They run the ship, right? And there's about 2,500 airmen who would either take care of, fly, maintain, or be part of the staff assigned to the air wing on board the aircraft carrier. Then you have 85 to 90 fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters on this boat at once, sailing and deploying. That's a lot of aircraft, right, for that small 4.5-acre deck. And just to give you an idea how heavy and big this thing is, in its critical areas, there's 2.5 inches of thick Kevlar armor. So this is a gargantuan of a thing, right? What is its scope? It controls, when it's sailing, it can control airspace and see what's happening up to 600 miles in either direction at once. Anything moving in the air, they know about it, right? Because it could be a threat. And they kind of, in this picture here, you're going to see in the bottom left corner on your screen, you're going to see a carrier strike group. So it's going to be the carrier, right? But it's this big floating thing, doesn't move fast. It's going to have about 15 other ships with it, comprising a carrier strike group. Mainly, you're going to have some guided missile destroyers that will deploy in a ring around it to defend it. And you have 1 or 2 submarines generally sneaking around underneath the surface, protecting from other submarines and below surface threats. And you'll have 1 or 2 resupply ships as well, because this thing needs resupplied like every couple of days for fuel and things. All right, quick note here on things you should look for on the carrier deck. Picture on your left, you're going to see it's got lots of labels, moving parts. Top right, you're going to see kind of the layout. So aviators refer to this as, hey, I'm parked in the street today. I'm going to find my aircraft in the street. And then you're going to give you taxi directions. Guys will wave with wands or their hands and direct you off to one of the main things you should see. How do you get off the ship? There's 4 catapults on a carrier, right? You're going to see those black lines that go forward on the aft. I think in your left picture you can see them. It says 1 and 2. They go right off the front of the ship. Then you have 3 and 4 that are angled and they come off that landing area as well. So there's 4, you can launch 4, you can get 4 aircraft queued up to launch at once. Under ideal flight conditions, if they had to, every 30 to 60 seconds they would shoot planes off that carrier deck, and they can do up to 30 or 40 of those at once in a large strike. You also have 1 landing zone, right? Those areas you see there on the left, obviously that's where you're going to land. The yellow and white stripe is what they call center line. And you have the foul lines running down the side of that, right? Where you cannot have an aircraft's wing when it lands go past that line, because things will be parked there, as you see in the bottom right. There's going to be aircraft lined up on that deck ready to go. And as you're recovering or launching, there's not a whole lot of room. There's very small margin of error for when you land, right? All right, so now we've seen the boat. What does the boat look like? What does it do, right? Let's see, what does it take to land on a boat, right? So we're going to kind of hit this as, what is an aviator's perspective? Then out of that, what's the LSO perspective? So first off, there's lots of rules about doing this. There's so many things that have to go right to make this happen. So there's a thing called NATOPS. That stands for Naval Air Training and Operating Procedures Standardization. No one ever says that. It's just called NATOPS, right? You may have seen the new movie where Tom Cruise walked out and he's like, this is everything you know about the F-18, and he tosses it in the trash. That's the book he had, right? This describes everything about how your airplane works. Then there's a separate NATOPS manual for being an LSO. And there's a separate one for carrier operations manuals. There's lots of these things. The 3 most relevant to our talk are displayed on your screen. And they go over all these things. They usually cover as well, like what do you do in the case of an emergency. All those types of things are embedded. It's a really good run book, a collection of run books, right? I'm getting ahead of myself, though. So if you don't follow these rules, there's disastrous consequences, right? So first of all, let's talk about a Case 1 recovery. A Case 1 recovery is a daytime recovery. There's going to be several intense diagrams you're about to see. Just pull out of them what you will, but let me go through and kind of walk you through what's going to happen. We've taken off the ship, we've done our training exercise, whatever we needed to do, we've employed ordnance in country, we're coming back to the boat. What happens? So first of all, realize that about the ship, there's a thing called BRC. You'll see that in the diagram on the right above the ship. The BRC, the base recovery course, that's the direction the ship is going, its cardinal direction. Let's say it's 270, right? Your final bearing, which is really important to you as a pilot because the deck goes like this and the landing area is like this. It's about 9 degrees off. You're going to want to know what final bearing would be. So as you swing around and land, you know where to come in, right? Other things of how this works are you have to check in with mother. That's what they call the ship when they're coming in. Mother is like, there's a thing called a TACAN, Tactical Air Navigation. It is a little emitter on the ship, and it tells you at any point in time how far you are from the ship in nautical miles. So a lot of things with geometry and flying, right? You need to know how far you are from the ship. So when you're between 150 miles, you have to contact the boat. You have to contact what they call the Marshal Department, and you're going to call in and you're going to say, for instance, here's one, Courage Marshal 403, marking Moms 270 for 65, Angels 10, State 5.6. You, being one of many, maybe 15 or 20 planes coming back in at once, are going to be making these calls. What that means is, Courage Marshal, Courage is the name of the carrier, its call sign. Marshal, I'm contacting you, I'm inbound. 403 is what they call my MODEX number, the number painted on the side of your aircraft. You say, marking Moms 270 means that from Mom, I am off 270 degrees off away from, that's the radial I am away from you, for 65 miles. I'm at Angels 10, that's 10,000 feet, and my state is 5.6. I have 5,600 pounds of fuel. They measure fuel in pounds. It's very interesting. Courage Marshal will talk back to you, give you the altimeter, what kind of recovery it is. They're going to guarantee you it's a case 1 because it's all visible. This is like visual flight. You can see what's about to happen. There's no bad things happening with the weather. And they're going to say, report at, see me at 10. So it means when you're at 10 miles, you need to be at your assigned altitude. Tell me when you're there, right? As you come up on that then, you have to be what they call in the Marshal stack. That's that green circle you see that has those 4 positions, right? You need to enter the Marshal stack. And what that is in your carrier air wing, you have several different squadrons. Each one of them is assigned a different altitude. A lot of this is about deconflicting, right? So you have your carrier. The Marshal stack starts at about 3,000 feet above that. You can be no lower than 2,000 because while you may be queuing up to land, they're shooting planes off the ship for the next event, right? So there's lots of things happening in the airspace. But you will come into your assigned altitude. You will circle the boat no greater than 5 nautical miles from the boat. You can only climb between points 1 and 3. So if the boat's below you, straight out, I can climb, ascend, basically, and you can only descend on the other half of that circle. So you don't have planes hitting each other, right? And what you do is everybody gets into this stack. They're all flying at their altitude. The carrier will in some way give you a signal is Charlie. Charlie is you're clear to land. And they can do that one of several ways. Someone will call it. Usually the air boss will say, all right, all 99, all flights, signal is Charlie. That means that the person who is the lowest in that stack that's circling breaks the deck. They're allowed to descend out of that 2,000 feet. And then there can be multiple different flights in that flight level from the squadron. Once everyone's off of there, the whole stack descends 1,000 feet. So eventually you empty the queue out, in our terms, right? And everybody lands. You come off of point 3, you fly that red line. You've now descended to 800 feet and 350 knots, period, on the button. No, you got to do that. Swing around, you'll hit what they call initial. That's 3 nautical miles behind the boat. You're coming in for a landing. You're still at 350 knots, 800 feet, but you're not going to come in and land just yet. You're going to come by, and we'll go over that in just a second on the next slide here. This is going to be the close-up, or what we call, you're going to hit as you break the deck, you're going to be coming in for your final, to fly the pattern. So after your initial, you're going to maintain 100 feet, and you're going to switch your altimeter to your radar altimeter being on. So now we're seeing what sea level tells us or pressure tells us what feet we're at. We're actually going to bounce radar waves off of the actual surface of the ocean to verify how high we are. Master arm switch is off. We don't want flares, chaff, or ordnance that is unexpended coming off of our plane while we're trying to land and causing a bigger problem. And you're going to want to make sure your hook's down, right? That tail hook that comes off the back of your plane, that needs to be down by this point or you might forget it because a lot's about to happen. As you come in over that initial, the carrier should be below you on your left. You can look out the canopy and see that the deck should be clear, or there should be, if you're the first one, the final plane should be about ready to depart and shoot off the catapults. If not, you need to spin, remain at 1,200 feet, and come back around, spin around the ship, and then descend again. All right, so once you're about, roughly it's between 1 and 4 nautical miles is what NATOP says, past the front of the ship, you can then brake. You're going to pull that stick hard left, idle on throttles, speed brake on full, because you need to go from 350 knots down to about 120 to 140 knots to get prepared for landing. You've got to get slowed down. You're going to want to make sure you're on BRC as you come straight through this approach and you start your turn. You're going to be turning to the reciprocal. So if you're going 0 or 360, you're going to go 180 as you come back around beside the boat and seat on your left-hand side now. And the goal is to be that you want to line up what they call a beam. So if you're flying, the carrier's here, you're about to make your final turn to actually land and get the hook. You're going to want to call a beam on the LSO platform. You'll see that's a speck. Some aviators say, I look for the back of the boat, the round down to see the stripes. Once you see that, you're going to begin your 30-degree turn. Meanwhile, you're going to be doing this on the throttle, trying to maintain that airspeed. You've also needed to descend to 600 feet through that straightaway. So now you're at 600 feet. You need to be at about 340 feet when you are 3/4 of a nautical mile behind the ship. So you're doing a bunch of this to maintain your altitude and keep the ship on what we call angle of attack. That's your diagram on the left side of your screen you're seeing. So what that is what we call it flying the donut. That yellow golden circle in the middle, that means you are on speed. That means your speed, which controls your pitch of your aircraft, is actually good to go. What we're worried about is the plane needs to be at a certain angle of attack for that hook to catch a wire. If you're too low, we're going to get a hook skip across the deck. You're not going to catch a wire. You're too high, you're going to get too slow, you're going to fall out of the sky and crash on the deck. So that's why we worry about what this angle of attack is. And as you do these things, you're going to see the golden yellow circle, and then the green means you're getting slower. If you see full green, no circle, you're a little high and slow. Otherwise, if you're fast, you're going to see the circle, yellow circle with a red arrow indicating that to you. The pilot sees that on your heads-up display. You'll see that in just a minute. All right. Meanwhile, remember, the ship, here's another diagram to kind of let that soak in. The ship is still moving at 30-plus knots, right? Because it has to generate wind over the deck to get your plane to land. So it's like, holy smokes, what's happening here, right? That's a super lot of information, and it's just like, wow. This is what they do every time they come back and land. And every airplane does this. It's kind of like deploying, right? In a sense, maybe. All right, so you're behind the ship now. We're at 3/4 of a mile. We can see the ship. You're going to see that top left picture. That's what you're going to kind of see at 3/4 of a nautical mile behind the ship. This is a critical stage now. The pilot has flown his numbers, flown his pattern. He needs to be where he needs to be. At that point, he's going to contact paddles or the LSO, and he's going to say, side number, type of aircraft, whether he sees the ball or not, and then a number, which is his fuel state. We're always worried about fuel. Fuel is life if you're an aviator, right? So you're going to hear a call, 403 Hornet. I'm an F-18 Hornet. 403 Hornet ball 4.7. Real quick call. It's usually way faster than that. They just blip it out. You'll hear it on a video here in a second. That tells the LSO, hey, here's my number, here's my type of aircraft, I see the meatball, I see my signals on the boat that I'm going to use to land appropriately, here's my fuel state. At that point, if you can't see the meatball, the little yellow light we'll talk about in a second, if you can't see that, you're going to call Clara, they're going to need to know about that, right? And then paddles will come back and say, Roger ball, that means I've got you, we're synced up here, you're looking good. And then at that point, you're going to follow the paddle's instructions until you come in for a controlled crash on the flight carrier deck. Right? You're coming in about 140 miles per hour. You are going to go from that to 0 in about a second, and you have about 200 feet to do that in. A very quick stop. Also, on that diagram on the carrier we saw before, there's 4 wires. You have a 1, 2, and a 3, and a 4 wire. The LSOs, under good conditions, they want you to target a 3-wire. That gives you 1 wire for correction on either side. The boat might be moving, right, or something, like they'll give you that, right? A 1-wire is considered very unsafe because you're going to be really close to the back of the ship when that hook catches that. That could be a problem. That gets you in trouble really fast if you get a 1-wire. And that's deemed very unsafe, right? So, as soon as you land on the deck, you're either going to stop or you're going to miss the hook and you're going to have to go around. So every time it's drilled into their heads, when you come to the deck and make contact, you feel in your backside, you feel it hit the deck, full afterburners, because you don't want to miss the hook and say, oh, I think I caught the hook, let's go back to 0, and you just like dribble off the end of the deck, right? That's actually happened before. So what do? The LSOs have a procedure. You have to go to burner to get back off the deck in case you miss a wire, right? Hopefully you trap in a wire, they call it, and you're good to go, right? And then a wave off is another term you might hear at any point from that groove where that groove starts. That means the LSO has either seen something or you as a pilot think you're in a good position, but you are not from a third-party observer. They're going to call wave off, or wave off burner now. You're going to hear very imperative commands. That's to save everyone's life, because someone or something may be fouling up the deck, right? All right. Here we're going to see a landing in real life, and hopefully the sound comes through. You can hear how loud it is. I'll narrate a little bit. He's in his, what we call the 90. He's coming in right for the groove here. You'll see him line up. We are in zip lip. There is no radio communications. This whole entire stack thing I talked about under a case 1 recovery is no communications at all. The Charlie flag is raised on the carrier. Everyone sees that. They start landing. No radio calls unless there's a safety of flight problem. He's now would have called the ball at this point. He's 3/4 nautical mile behind the ship. If you can see his hand down there, it's moving back and forth on that throttle, and he's got his stick moving all around. He's got his lineup, meatball, and angle of attack all set. Here he comes into land. Boom. That's an arrestment right there. Pretty decent one. Came right in. If you notice, the meatball was on the left there, that little yellow ball. We'll talk about it in just a second. But also, if you'll notice too, right here, there's an aircraft, an E-2D Hawkeye, spinning up right here on his right and getting ready to launch off the front of the ship. So while people are landing, they're queuing up people to shoot them off. And this is just an ongoing process. High speed, low margin of error, right? Also, while you're taking off in all of this, there's people, I don't know if you saw it, braking overhead. So other aircraft that are flying around coming in. So under a case 1 recovery, you're recovering someone every 30 to 60 seconds. It's very fast. They want to open the carrier. The carrier has to go straight to do landings. Strategy here, right? If the carrier has to go straight, other people can see where it's going. Normally, carriers zigzag to throw off tracking. Where do they go, right? So if it's going straight, the carrier itself is vulnerable to attack. Therefore, the captain of that ship, I said, I want those planes up and off as fast as you can because we got to get back on like evasive maneuvers. So that's how that works. Now, if that wasn't hard enough, right, let's talk quickly about a case 3 recovery. This is for night or bad weather. What do you do when you're coming in at night? I'm not going to go through all of this business. This is even more intense than the first time. Moral of this story, though, is that you have a carrier. It's pitch black. You can't see anything. You don't want the carrier to be seen, right? You may be in an area of the world that it's not safe to turn all the lights on and light it up, right, to land on. So what do? What they do is they take aircraft and they stack them up individually. So if you're in a flight of 2 or 4, when you get to the boat, you call in. They're going to go through a very advanced readback procedure of everything that they're going to say, here's the altimeter, here's the case record, all these different things. You read it back to them. They say, read back correct. They give you an estimated time of landing or approach time. When they give you it might be 10 minutes from now. You have to hit 21 nautical miles behind the boat at that point. If you don't, you're going to foul up the whole system. And what they do is they'll bring you up and marshal you instead of a circle above the aircraft carrier. You're going to be 21 miles behind. 6 miles up is the first aircraft. 22 miles and 7,000 feet is the next. 23 and 8 as it goes to infinity, right? And they stack up. You can see those kind of diagrams there. And then you come in to land in a straight-in approach. There is no turning at night because things happen. You're not, as I'm going to show you in a minute, you're not getting many visual cues from the boat. People who do this say at night when they're landing, it's like a postage stamp. And of all of this, the boat moves in 3 dimensions at all times. You have the deck going like this. It can be going like this. It can be going like this in waves. So at night, I've heard people that I've interviewed and talked to, they said, like, you'll be coming in, the deck will come up, and you'll say, oh, I'm like above the carrier as it rocks in a wave. And then it goes completely away and you have no lights. It's literally completely black. And you're supposed to just fly straight, like, uh-oh. It's very, very scary coming in. They do have a thing called the instrument carrier landing system that does give you needles and a bullseye. You'll see a picture of that in a minute. When you do that, that does give you like an ILS glide slope to come into the carrier. But once again, use of that is normally good. If you're in combat, you may not want very large radar emissions going out. That's a problem. Here is what you would see in a typical Case 3 CV1 approach. I think we have comms in this one too.
302 on glide path on course 3/4 mile, call the ball.
302, horn of ball, 59.
Roger, ball, 25 knots.
He just called the ball. What can you see? Nothing. There's no ball. He sees it. If you can see it right now, there is a speck on the screen, about 2/3 of the way over on the left. Now you see it right there. Okay, he's about 1/10 of a mile. There it is. That's a nighttime landing right there. Very intense. You see nothing. And then you hear that whoop, whoop. That means that the radar actually was like, there's something under me less than 10 feet. And he actually, that was him hitting the deck. That's him. As soon as you land, it flaps up. You hear raise your wings, get your flaps up, and then taxi out because 30 to 45 seconds behind you comes another plane like this. And at night, they can't see you or know to wave off, right? So LSOs are very critical at this point.
403.
Let's move on. Here is a video of not nighttime, but like a fog landing. What do you think that looks like, right? This you'll see, I'll point out before we go through it. In the fog, you're going to see the bullseye. That's like the little crosshairs you're going to see, in a better word. You fly that. So you want to put your velocity vector, the little circle with the 3 lines on it, you want to put that in the middle of the bullseye. And if you fly that, it'll bring you straight into the proper approach point. Here it comes. No comms. I think the comms had a lot of like language in it, so they just blurped out the comms. Because I mean, if you're doing this, he's at the boat right now. And he's landing, and then he sees the deck after he lands. And you have an LSO trying to help someone in this state. So at this point, the pilot has no information, just an LSO, right? So we've covered phase 1. Let's talk about phase 2. Paddles. Paddles' mission is the safe and expeditious recovery of aircraft to the carrier. Their motto is rectum non bustus. That's what you think that means. Don't bust your bottom on the back of the ship, right? What are the job recs for being an LSO? So you are a keeper of the culture and safety guidelines and protocols, and they take this very seriously. That whole saying like, yeah, the rules are written in blood, they actually do that. Someone dies, they make a new rule to prevent that again. So it's very high stakes. And they take this very seriously. They're being these keepers of the culture. They really drive these conversations with pilots about how they perform and adhere to procedures. They also take things that happen bad and they send them back to big Navy, we would call it, or like, the head of like the big wigs, if you will, and saying, hey, we should have these following procedures for safety, right? And then they can drive that back down through the schoolhouse and teach them. So you got to be a fully rated carrier pilot. Generally, they recommend them having over 1,000 hours in the aircraft. Junior pilots can be selected, freshly coming in, and then trained at a schoolhouse they have in Virginia as well. But there is a lot of formal training that goes with it. Here's some of the various qualifications you can get. Field qual, squadron quals. So squadron qual is like you can like land your own airplane and your squadron mates. You know them well enough to do that. Wing qual is I can land not only my aircraft, but all the other types of aircraft that might be on the carrier. This gets more advanced because now you have to learn, you have to know how all the other planes fly and what their characteristics are, right? And then you have the staff qual. That's a big one because that's going to be the senior LSO on board the boat. There's usually 2 of them. They're called CAG paddles. Chief of the Air Group, Commander of the Air Group, whatever you want to mean, take that to mean. But they're responsible for training and qualifying all the LSOs under them, and they also have to be on the platform. One of those 2 has to be on the platform for every recovery period as like the safety observer. Anything goes wrong, the Air Wing LSO is on the hook for what happened that day. Why paddles? So briefly, paddles they waved literal paddles in the beginning, right? It was like a rite of journey for them. They would make their own paddles. They'd wrap up whatever they wanted or could find on there and make a paddle. In World War II, you're bringing propeller aircraft aboard, so you had like more time to do things because jets just go faster, right? But I think it's funny, like that second picture there, you see the guy like in his boxers, like waving aircraft in World War II. It's like that hot, and there was like, they were figuring it out as they went, right? That sounds familiar for DevOps, right? Kind of figure some things out as we go. Then they started getting nighttime operations. They had to like wear battery packs that like lit up. They had like little wires that ran all over them that lit them up. So the people could see them coming in. This is what they did. They waved. Hence you call waving a pass or paddles. This is where it comes from. Here's just a quick graphic. You can see different things mean different things. Tooling. Let's go through this. So what do they have? What do they use for their tooling? IFLOS. This is the Improved Fresnel Lens Optical Landing System. It's this light system you see pictured in the middle, and then on the left side of your screen, you're going to see the actual pictures that you're able to take of them. What it does is, it's a Fresnel lens, so this is what they call the meatball, or the ball, we hear them say. That's that yellow dot in the middle, that's the meatball. If you're flying in the correct glide slope, or where you need to be coming in for an approach, that yellow ball will be right in the middle of the 2 datum lights, those green lines, right? That's where you want to be. The other lights are used, red and green lights are used for if they're what they call an MCON, emission conditions, certain times you don't want to be broadcasting any electrical radiation of any type because you're in a bad guy country. That's when they would just use the lights to signal like, I see you, you're good, or this is bad. They'd flash the red lights. That means wave off, but then when they can't actually talk about it, right? And a pilot has three things coming in. Meatball, lineup, and angle of attack. That's what they call the scan. You keep moving between those three things every few seconds. Because if you fixate on one, you're going to lose your orientation and your situational awareness. And so meatball, yellow light. Lineup is that stripe right down the middle of the deck. And then angle of attack is on my HUD, the little yellow donut. Do I have that, right? All right, here you're going to see a carrier qualification flight. So this is someone who's learning to be a pilot. They've gone through flight school. They're coming to the boat. This is good, though, if you want to watch the left-hand side as he's coming in. You're going to see the meatball. And you should be able to see it in this quick clip.
1 Delta Ball 1.4 Echo 1. Roger that.
He's messing with his angle of attack. See that E bracket moving up and down? He's trying to get that angle of attack locked in there. And the meatball's on your left right there. It's the little dot. He's currently above, so he's high. You've got to bring it down. There's the wires right there. Just heavy breathing. All those G's, right, coming off. All right, so as an LSO, where do you work? What's your office look like? This is it. This is the LSO platform, bottom left corner on your screen. You are within feet of the action. The wingtip is probably 3 or 4 feet to your left if you're having planes come in. You're that close. The tools you use, besides that, you do have several. You can see in front of them there on the ground. They do have a TV screen with what they call the plat cam. Shows you in relation to across where the plane's at in there. Also gives them information. There is a data link between the plane, and it shows them what the numbers the pilot is seeing in his plane, what his, on the bottom right there, you'll see it says hook to deck ratio or hook to ramp ratio. They can actually see if he flies like this is how high his hook will be above the deck. They get a lot of data to use, right? And I think that's called ILARTS, the Integrated Launch and Recovery Television System. Quick note here on this thing, observability, when we talk about that with LSOs, the pilot sees the yellow donut, but the LSO, he might be like, I am flying the meatball, or I am on angle of attack. That's what the LSO can see that. If you look right above the landing, you're on the front, there's a little yellow light. There's a little box, and it has a yellow, red, and green light. So it actually reproduces what the pilot is seeing, so the LSO can actually look, and as he's watching, and say, oh, I do see you're fast and high, dude. Like, you got to slow down. He can see that, and it helps them see that as well for recording. They record these things as well. I've heard that if a good case of beer to your maintenance officer gets that to be broken for your flight, so then no one can see what you're actually seeing, except for you. Funny story, right? You've got to keep these things in check as you're trying to get wire number 3. All right. We have the airwing LSO who's on the platform at all times during a recovery. You have the controlling LSO. They're the one who's actually sitting there making the calls. Roger, ball. Keep it coming. Looking good. You're high. You're low. We have a backup LSO who's standing there right in front of the TV. He would be out on the deck actually watching this. The other LSO, who would be your backup, would be just watching, making sure planes coming over here are doing okay, because this guy's fixated right here in the groove, right? They're going to be watching this half of the pattern coming in, making sure aircraft are stacked up appropriately, giving any guidance there. They're also usually more senior, so they're going to look to the guy, and he's going to come back and give the grades quick in between flying, and they'll fill in with the color and train those two guys as well. And you also have a deck status LSO. You'll see him in just the video here in the next clip. He just stands there and watches reverse. The planes are coming behind him. He makes sure the landing area is not foul, that we have a green deck ready for recovery. And he'll stand there until he sees we're clear. Then he'll walk and he'll physically touch the controlling LSO and like, hey, I'm giving you feedback here. We have a clear deck. Then he'll get off and clear. And at that point, then you'll see this picture here in the middle. They're holding up this weird thing over their head. They call it the pickle. That's the switch where if they hold this up visually for the pilot, the whole deck, if you look, that means foul deck, do not land, there will be a crash, or someone is in the landing area. When they give that guy gives the clear, they then will lower that pickle switch and then get pickle. He'll have his phone, he'll be ready to go. Pulling that pickle switch will make all the lights flash on the meatball, saying like, go around, wave off, we have a problem, like there's a foul deck, right? That's how that works. It's called the pickle. All right, here we're going to see a clip of them actually calling a recovery. Here's the guy out front, holding his hands up, his glasses, watching the landing area. He's giving grades right now. The guy's with sting paddles. He's giving the grades from the last guy who just landed, saying, yeah, he was high in the middle, low, whatever. The guy writing it there, it says Cougar, he's notating. Our backup LSO is the lady standing here with her pickle switch up, When you see CAG 17, that would be our air wing LSO, who's just there as an overall safety observer, just checking it out. We have a plane now, if you can see it coming in, he's making his final turn just about to come wings level, which means he'll be in the groove. He'll have 15 to 20 seconds once he's wing level until the landing is completed, if it was successful. He's giving calls right now on the phone. High, low, you're looking good, keep it coming, whatever he's saying, we can't really hear. Everyone's on their phones listening, giving feedback. Here it comes, the pilot is having some wing issues there on the final. He's watching him. You'll see the impact on the deck right there when it shakes. Okay, instantly pickle up, we have a foul deck plane there, so anybody who was behind would know. And then we reset that process. He's giving grades right now, yelling out, give him an okay pass, he was high in the middle, like blah, 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 giving him that. That's how the deck works. This is a landing signal deck, a platform in operation. All right, grading, quickly. They have a sheet, they keep track of everything. At any of those stages, they can tell you whether you're high, low. They really want to know the trend of the pilot, how safe are they, right? Here's the grading. It's like there are literally 5 pages for each like different stage about the different codes you can use to grade them. They have like this jargon. You can read there, but you can see they have a start X, they have a Roger ball, in middle, in close, at the ramp, and then in the wires. They give you feedback about all those stages. So complex. This is 20 seconds of time. They give all this feedback, right? So an example grade would be that, a one-liner. 330, your side number. Okay means like it was a fairly safe pass, right? All those letters basically mean you were high at the start, a little in the parentheses. Wings were rocking in the middle. You were high in close, a little because of the parentheses. Too much rate of descent in close, so that plane was sinking really fast at the end there. And then eased guns to land, or like eased guns in wire, EGTL. That means that like the pilot actually withdrew the throttle when he landed because he knew he had a hook. He did not go to burner to make sure that even though the wire stopped him, then he came out. He did not do that. That's a big safety issue, right? And he caught a 3-wire. That's the perfect wire to catch. The main thing, though, they all talk to you about is the okay. That is what matters. Safety, not about precision of wire. And then they track that on what they call a greenie board in the squadron room. So you get green, yellow tags up there to show what your different grades are. This becomes highly competitive amongst fighter pilots. They're all like, oh, this is really, like, I got to be better, right? And it's kind of the running like competition throughout the whole cruise of 9 months is like, how good can you be? There's an award at the end called the Tailhook Award for who gets the most successful landings on the 3-wire. So now you understand LSOs. Let's go to the meat of the talk here quickly. How do they compare to DevOps or SRE? First thing is, both people have swag. Those patches they wear, you saw pictures throughout this like talk of the patches, they're like tech stickers for us we put on our laptops. They're like highly coveted. They actually trade them like wampum, was what I was told on the boat. So they'll be like, I need a new pair of boots. And they're like, I don't have any boots, we're deployed. They're like, here's 2 patches, and they're like, here's a new pair of shoes, man. Like that you can trade for stuff, right? So it's kind of cute, fun, but it does have a sense of camaraderie, right? So just like us, tech stickers. In my analogy here, I'm going to pose that a pilot might be like a developer, and an LSO might be like a DevOps person, or SRE, doing ops, right? Flying is hard and complicated, just like developing is, right? And we as SREs or DevOps, whatever you want to call it, we're there to be kind of safety, resilience, and observers to help them out, right? So how are we similar? Let's keep going with this analogy, right? We both have SOPs, right? We have all of our like literature, our canon of books. They have NATOPs, so we have those, right? We have a mission statement. So the mission statement for the LSOs is that they obviously are responsible for the safety and expeditious recovery of aircraft, which in that order is what they would tell you, right? And it says, like some quotes from that whole block there are, through training and experience, they are capable of correlating factors of wind, weather, aircraft capabilities, ship configuration, pilot experience, in order to provide optimum control and assistance in aircraft landings. How is that kind of like us? I think it is. Like we land software, we bring it to a deployment, right? Through all these complex different means, and we're observers. They're helping things, whether it's servers, observability. We help all these things go to developers and give them feedback to get them aboard, or launched in our case, deploying of software, right? Hopefully it's starting to click. You're seeing it a little bit here. Look at this. They have like AOA indexers, and they have like the meatball, and we have dashboards, like, right? We have metrics, things that we hand out, right? What we do is we both have tooling that provides like a safe operation limits for our software, right? We all have documentation. They make graphics. We do too. your measures of success are, we have kind of similar things. We can have like DORA metrics, right? We talked about this, MTTR, deployment frequency, lead time for changes, change failure rate, versus for them, they're going to look for boarding rate. They give you a GPA for your boarding, like they average your wires together, like what's your GPA looking like. They give you an overall grade for safety. Are you an okay? Are you a fair pass? Whatever. And they also give you your launch recovery frequency metrics as well. We both have incidents and mishaps. Like, this was a picture here from the plat cam. It's on YouTube. The actual crash it was leaked. It was from, I think, January, February of this year, so very recent. An F-35, we lost one there in a crash, but we both have things. In this case, theirs are written in blood. Ours are more of like things happened that were bad, right? And we kind of like work through that as well, but we both have them to deal with, right? We both have like a pecking order of different LSOs. Like there's like all the ones I went through, the different qualifications and who they report to. We have the same thing, right? Individual contributor, we have all our different staff, senior, whatever your company does. We have those, right? We also grade and measure our services, hopefully. Now this gets into the more like maybe aspirational context, right? But like they have a greenie board. We have like deploy boards, or like we do checks on our services and make them more mature. This is a screenshot from the tool that I help work on, ops level. We measure maturity of services. So we have a lot of similarities. Now I'm going to go briefly and tell a few C stories and get those principles out for us. The first is communicate with intention. The primary concern of an LSO, what they tell you, is not to talk a pilot off the wire. What that means is you could sit there and be like, you're looking good. Oh, really good. Oh, you're 3 degrees there. You give them all this information. They're like, I'm just trying to land the boat. I want meatball lineup and angle of attack. That's all I want. I have too much going on, right? So don't talk them off the wire with your calls. They have a thing called sugar calls. If you know it's a pilot who's having his trend chart, you're looking at that, you're like, he's trending unsafe as he's coming around the boat, you may intervene early. Instead of waiting for the ball call, you may say, paddles contact 403. That means like, hey, 403, I'm paddles, I see you, I'm taking over early. Listen to my calls, I'm gonna help bring you in, right? Or you might tell them a few extra times, hey, looking good. If they're a senior pilot and they're having great safety trends, you're not gonna say, looking good, keep her coming, because they don't need that. They know they're doing good, they're gonna keep her coming, right? But you may want to employ sugar calls, right? So as an action item off of this communicate with intention, like don't be overly prescriptive with developers or others in general. As we talk with them, talk them to get them through an understanding of how and why we do things and help them really get after learning to make the right decision the next time, right? As opposed to sometimes in our jobs, I feel like, myself included, it can be very prescriptive in what we did. The developers didn't deploy this way, and you got to hit this button to get that done, or why didn't you look here for that metric? Take a pause, give them some sugar calls. If they're struggling, or if you are, just help guide them to making a good decision in the future. As another illustration of this, be specific when you communicate. They use specific language. This graphic here briefly is, there's a lot of radio comms going on at the boat at the same time. When the LSO system, when you hear a Roger, or someone makes a ball call, ball, and they say Roger ball, it's supposed to be no more comms by anyone until that airplane is safely aboard. Because what if he's trying to say, come left, come right, to save the guy's life to bring him aboard, right? But someone else is like, checking in Marshall, 403, fuel state, blah, 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 and they're like 100 miles away. They're not needed to overrun that at the same time, right? So what they do is they have very specific language. You can only say the following things you see on your graphic. If the plane is where that says right for lineup, if they're there on that picture, you say right for lineup. You can't say come right, or you're right, or get right. You literally by NATOPS have to say right for lineup, and if they're left, you say come left. So if you hear a radio transmission, left, or come, the pilot's going to know, if I heard come, that means the only other option could be left on the end of that sentence. Or right for lineup. If you hear lineup on your final approach, that means right for lineup. You have to know that. You're high, and then power means you're low. You can't say, oh, you're low, you're getting really low. It's power, and then they're going to wave you off if you can't get it up in time, right? So be intentional in your communications. We can do that, right? Have some jargon for your team so that they know when you say something, this is what it means. And that can roll to your developers and your executives as well. Do you have jargon? I'm not saying that in a bad way, just like if you say something, maybe publish a book, your own little mini NATOPS, and say like, hey, if we say this is a problem, it is a problem for the following reasons. So everyone's in the same language. We can communicate more intentionally, I think. Build a culture of safety and reliability. This one is kind of like, yeah, no kidding, right? But think about how they do it. LSOs, after they brief their pilots, or after they have recoveries, they're all done for their 6-hour shift or whatever, they will go down to the squadron rooms where the pilots are at, and they will actually, with each pilot, brief their pass and say, you were super high, dude, at the start. That is, like, unacceptable. Get it down, blah, blah. Or they're going to be like, great pass. It was really good. Maybe you could have fudged it a little here, but, like, you're going to probably win tailhook. You're, like, on the path, right? They're going to give them that feedback in the moment. So, action items for us. Are we able to talk through our developers or customers about like how they're doing, what they're doing that's good and bad, and then coach them, right? And even like with DevOps, a lot of times we're asked to go in bed with the team and help them. Are we building those relationships so the next time a pilot's coming in, he's going to think, oh, I know Sam, he's an LSO. Like, I know him. Like, there's this trust between them, right? If he says come right or left line or whatever he's saying, I'm going to do it because I just trust him because this relationship, he's in my corner, right? Are we that way with our people? Whether it's our team, developers, business folk, customers, could we be better in our culture of safety and reliability? All right, you're going to see another video here. What to watch for is how low this guy is, and then what he does right when he gets near the boat. Kind of scary. That's him. He's going to come up here in just a second. Wait for it. There he is. There he comes. This is an F-14 Tomcat, like in Top Gun, the first one. Right near the edge of the boat. That is totally unapproved. That is not in the NATOPS. Like, that is totally, like, unsafe, right? And then this was in the news, actually. That's the picture of what happened. There's a photographer back by the island on the carrier. He took that. He's within, like, feet of the LSO deck. Like, what's this guy doing? Come to find out, there was a big hullabaloo about it, right? This guy was a senior airman. He was preparing his F-14 demo for, like, an air show. And so he decided, he went and did this. Everybody's like, oh, how unsafe, like this is so bad. He said, well, first of all, I briefed every LS on the boat about what I was going to do. They approved it. Even the chief of naval operations, the guy who answers to the Secretary of Defense, he's actually the guy standing in the middle with his hands behind his back like this. That's him. So like, there's no one that he wasn't doing there, or there's no one that didn't know what he was about to do, right? But to the common observer, that was like totally unsafe, man. What's going on with that, right? So with that, action I would say for us is, know your people. And as you build a culture of safety and reliability, realize that with some people, things that look unsafe, you might give leeway, I guess I would say, for a senior person who knows what they're doing. To someone younger, they may say that was unsafe. But yet we could coach that and say, hey, we understand why that was or wasn't safe, and then use that as a training opportunity, right? And don't buzz the tower, like Tom Cruise, right? Be an expert is the next to last one. These pictures here are from a place called Pry Fly on the ship. Right above the carrier on the island of the ship, right next to almost the top of that little island structure, you have primary flight operations. They call it Pry Fly. In there you have the air boss and the mini boss. Those guys are responsible for all operations of the air all around the carrier for safety. Like, they just run everything. The LSOs will call up and talk to them. The captain of the ship will say, we're going to land now. We're going to bring aircraft in. Here we go. The air boss says, yes, sir. He'll call the LSOs. Here we go. And he'll make on the call over like the speakers on the deck saying, prepare for recovery, blah, blah, and give them all the instructions of what they're going to do, right? From his position, he also has controls to see. When someone calls and they say, hey, Hornet ball, or you give that aircraft call, there's a specific tension of weight you have to put for each aircraft. If you don't, the aircraft will snap a wire and go off the edge of the deck. So they have to dial the tension. Hence, when they do this, the LSOs, the air boss is hearing it's a Hornet, right? So he's not, but someone listening on the deck is dialing in, we need 20,000 pounds of steam on that arresting cable. So when it hits it, we can actually tension him and stop him, right? So the air boss and mini boss and Pry Fly are seeing that, and those gauges you see at the bottom, those red dials, they're going to see what's dialed up. The LSO is watching as well, especially if it's night. Each aircraft, different type, has a different sequence of lights flashing, and he can even hear by the sound. They're trained to hear by sound. They can say, yep, definitely like a Hornet, we're good to go. There's always this double checking that nobody ever talks about. It just is done, instinctively built in, right? But in this up here in Pry Fly, you have these pictures here on the right of like these placards you see there, the different squadron insignias. Underneath of those, in the real world, whenever there's flight operations happening, they're going to have one person from each squadron standing there with a copy of the NATOPS like the whole time this is going on. They're what they call the squadron rep. The squadron rep is there, so if there's an in-flight emergency or like, I'm losing gas, I don't know why, I need help, he is the technical expert on tap. The air boss can say, you're on the horn, man, pick up the phone, you got to talk to your buddy from your squadron, like he's struggling, we have fuel issues. And he'll say, hey, this is, so-and-so, what's going on, buddy? And they'll talk it through right there. And if he needs to, he can call like a maintenance person and be like, I got problems, right? That's the kind of thing that they can work through together. to make sure that they have an expert. So I would say be an expert. With that, I would say that, and what I mean by that is be someone who is there to be an expert to help out when there's a problem. Rush in and know your craft. Understand it, strive to learn. It's that continuous improvement kind of a thing, right? I'll talk about that in a second, but like, I think we could be better at that as well, as a profession, right? Being that rep to have people's backs. Fly the meatball of operational excellence, I would say, right? Oh, I skipped it. The pickle switch, the foul deck, right? Do we have that? We are the people in our organization, I think, that when we're releasing software, we have the pickle switch. Oh no, foul deck, something's wrong. We need to tell people, right? And always giving that sense too. It's always up. Anybody can always look and see, oh, I ain't going to go out in the landing area because we're calling foul, right? We need to stay away. Keep it clear so I can call it a clear deck, right? Kind of keep that focus on that. Do we have the tooling and the ability and trust from organizations applying it to us to wave off a deployment? Can we do that? Some people say yes, some people no. I don't know. What kind of trust needs to be built to have that to happen? What kind of tooling, instrumentation do we have to have that to happen, right? That's a net on the LSO platform. I would say briefly with this is, they have a net in case something bad happens. Do you? Have a plan B. When things go wrong, it deploys. If something goes wrong, the aircraft isn't going to make it into those, like the landing zone area, they literally have the ability to dive off into a net that catches them where they'll be free from the destruction that's going to happen on the top of the deck, and they can just like ride out whatever happens and climb out of the net and see what's going on, right? Have a plan B for your deployments. It's kind of corny, but like, it's true, right? Rules to live by, they have some, they're kind of funny, but they're kind of prescriptive. Really, when I see those, I kind of think about, do we have run books to help our pilots stay on a meatball and land safely? And are they curated by us as senior aviators in the org, right? Change the pilot, not the plane. It's not about us building better technology, it's about helping people, right? I think that's a major, major point here. Also, too, to echo what we've heard earlier today, do we have a way, all the different qualifications, do we have a way to build DevOps engineers and build them up and like hire people who we can develop versus just hiring senior talent? I think that's something that I'm personally working on with my organization. How do we hire someone who's not senior, give them a chance, they may not have any experience at all, but help teach them, right? LSOs are really good at doing that, and I think we could as well. All of that to say, right? What DevOps is all about at its core. Culture, automation. Hopefully it reminds you of this. Calms, right? What DevOps is all about at its core. Culture, automation, lean practices, measuring calms, right? What DevOps is all about at its core. Culture, automation, lean practices, measuring everything, and sharing with each other. With that, I would point out, one, if you're interested in aviation, highly recommend the Fighter Pilot podcast. It goes through lots of topics like I've talked about today in extreme detail that is amazing and awesome and fascinating. And with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your conference.